And good evening now. Thanks for being with us on this Thursday, February 9th, as we recap what happened inside the courtroom today in the Alec Murdaugh double murder trial going on in Colleton County. The disgraced attorney accused of shooting and killing his wife, Maggie, and his son, Paul, some 19 months ago. Now, following today's testimony, after we recap it, we're going to be joined, as usual, by a criminal defense attorney for his take on the latest developments going on in Walterboro. Today's testimony started with an FBI engineer back on the stand. He actually testified yesterday afternoon about data retrieved from Alec Murdaugh's vehicle. Investigators were able to find when the vehicle was started, put in and out of park, and when it was connected to a Bluetooth device. This morning, defense attorneys asked if investigators found location data from the night of the murders.
The phone number itself is not listed.
There's direct testimony that there's sometimes you can get location data. Were you able to get location data from the vehicle?
From the infotainment system, we had limited location data, and there was some location data recovered from the OnStar module.
And do you recall, was there any location data recovered for the day of June 7th, 2021?
There was no location data recovered on June 7th.
Now, prosecutors have established a timeline of when Murdaugh's vehicle was put in and out of park on June 7th. However, investigators could not determine when the vehicle was actually moving. The state also presented more testimony of Murdaugh's alleged financial crimes today. Prosecutors say all of this is important because it establishes a motive for the slayings. And the witnesses that testified today testified last week before Judge Clifton Newman as he was deciding whether or not to actually allow the allegations of financial crimes in as evidence. So many of you are probably already familiar with what they had to say today. But back on the stand, Chris Wilson. He and Murdaugh were friends and is the attorney who worked with him on a Mack truck case. That's the settlement check that went missing, and it was that check Murdaugh's paralegal talked about finding in yesterday's testimony. Wilson told jurors Murdaugh asked that he pay the money directly to him and not his law firm. When the firm asked Murdaugh for the money, Wilson ended up loaning him $192,000 to help cover the total amount.
I knew enough to know, enough of the law to know that you can't enforce an agreement with a person that's deceased against their estate unless you got some documentation of it. And I said, boy, I hate to even ask you to do this. And I was worried that he was going to kill himself, you know, still at that point. And I was worried about what that would, mean, more so on a human personal level, but also what that would mean about me trying to get repaid. And I said, I hate to ask you to do this, but can we do this? And he said, sure, no problem.
Well, also back on the witness stand today, Tony Satterfield. He's the son of Gloria Satterfield. She was Alex Murdaugh's housekeeper who died falling downstairs inside the family home. Satterfield said Murdaugh told him he would get money to pay for his mom's medical bills and to help the family.
Yes.
Satterfield said he heard in the media that the case had been settled, but Murdaugh told him he was still working to get the money. Here's Satterfield reading a text from Murdaugh after the settlement had already been reached.
All right, and can you read that to the jury?
Finally getting some movement, still a ways to go, doing good, was just thinking about and thought I'd check in. Hope to see you soon.
Still a ways to go is what he said?
Yes.
At that point in time, did he tell you there had already been 2 recoveries in the case?
No.
Didn't it ever tell you that he also had a $5 million umbrella policy?
No.
Did he ever tell you that there had been a recovery against that?
No.
Did he ever tell you that there had been a recovery for $3.8 million against that?
No.
Did he ever pay you 1 penny of $3.8 million?
No.
Again, Satterfield testifying that he heard in the media and not from Murdaugh that his mom's case had been settled. And late today, Jan Malinowski, the current CEO of Palmetto State Bank, was also on the stand. He took over after the former CEO, Russell Lafitte, was fired for financial fraud allegations linked to Murdaugh. He testified that Murdaugh owed more than $4.3 million to the bank and had an account that was overdrawn by nearly $367,000. He said that after the bank started looking into Murdaugh's relationship with the bank, Russell Lafitte deposited $400,000 in Murdaugh's account.
When you had a discussion at the board meeting in August of 2021, were there any representations made to you about the purposes for some new loan to Alec Murdaugh?
Yes, there were.
And what were you told the purposes were?
Repairs to beach house.
Repairs to the beach house?
Yes, sir.
And who told you that?
Russell Lafitte.
Okay. And did he tell you at any time that it was $350,000 to Chris Wilson to put some fees back?
No, sir.
Did he tell you that at any time it was $400,000 to cover a negative $347,000 overdraft that the bank had been paying for him since June of 2021?
No, sir.
All right, Taylor Bell is going to join us now, criminal defense attorney here in Columbia. We're going to talk about everything that happened in court today. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you for having me.
So at 6 o'clock tonight, our Caitlin Hagwood was reporting live from outside the Colleton County Courthouse. She said at some point today, several times today, jurors could be seen yawning, stretching, their heads held down, basically disinterested in some of this financial testimony that was going on today. At least that's the impression that I got from that report. What's your take on that?
Yeah, my take is very similar in that they're not keeping their eye on the prize, which is the murder case. And I think the jurors are, all right, we know he stole. We know he's a thief, but show us murder. And I think that's a question that they're going to have. I'm not sure the repetitiveness of these witnesses saying kind of the same thing. Each of them, he stole this, he was covering up this, he stole this, he was covering up this, playing games with the money. Not sure.
Some of these witnesses obviously testifying for the first time in front of a jury. They were on the stand last week without the jury present, but it's been a steady flow of witnesses for the past 4 days about alleged financial crimes for this jury.
That's correct. Most of the witnesses today were all about financial crimes. We had the bank CEO, we had the Satterfield case, and then we also had Chris Wilson, the family friend that he grew up with and who was also a lawyer, all about the stealing. And I think it also gave, though, the defense an opportunity to ask questions of his friend that he cared about his family.
Right.
And to show that he cared for him.
At this point, the jury knows that the state is arguing that the alleged motive here would be to buy more time to buy more time to do something about these alleged financial crimes. That's why the state would be presenting all this evidence, correct? They would know that by now.
I think they would know that, but we don't know that for sure. When you're trying a case, you don't know what the jury's thinking. It's hard to know what they're thinking because they're sitting there, they're not communicating. So from the prosecution, you're hoping that that's what they're seeing here. And that's what they're believing, that, hey, the motive is he's trying to cover up. But that's kind of where closing comes into play. At the end, after everybody's testified, that you close it all together and you explain what these people did. I understand during opening that is what the state said, but you kind of put it all together.
Right. As far as how much longer the state is going to present a case, we heard today that the latest, I guess, the state would go would be next Wednesday. That would be the 15th of February. We also heard today that the defense plans to present evidence and testimony, and that they may have about a week's worth of witnesses as well. So that adds 2 more weeks onto the trial from yesterday. That puts us at the 22nd. Then on the 23rd, or 22nd or 23rd, somewhere in that time frame, I guess, closing arguments would be heard. If the jury were to get the case, say, on a Friday afternoon, this jury is not sequestered, from my understanding. They get to go home at night. If the jury were to get this case, say, on the 23rd or 24th, a Thursday or a Friday, and continue to deliberate, and it goes into the weekend, would the judge make them stay the weekend to try to come to a decision, or send them home and bring them back on a Monday?
I think Judge Newman would make that decision based on, his experience, having been in front of Judge Newman before and tried cases and seen cases tried in front of Judge Newman. He holds the jury there for a substantial period of time. He'll hold them after hours when they're deliberating. So it wouldn't surprise me if he would call them back on a Saturday. That wouldn't surprise me at all. I don't know if he will do it though, but I wouldn't be surprised with that at all.
We know there is more testimony upcoming other than financial allegations against Alec Murdaugh, because the pathologist still has to testify in front of the jury and is going to lay out exactly how Paul and Maggie Murdaugh died. That is still to come, correct?
That is still to come. We're still going to likely hear where the entry wounds were from the pathologist, and what organs the actual bullets hit, and what the cause of death was. He's going to come in and tell us that, so we get kind of a medical terminology of the cause of death.
Do you think a lot is being thrown at the jury right now? Do you think a whole lot of, from the slayings, the guns, the weapons, the videotapes, the allegations of financial crimes, a lot's being put on that jury right now? They're having to absorb all of this without the ability to take notes in this trial.
That's correct. They're getting a lot of witnesses, and I'm not necessarily sure that it's in a succinct fashion. Some of the witnesses have been, out of sync to a certain extent, but that's again where closing comes in for each side. The jury, I've never sat on a jury. I've been in front of juries, and I think they're listening, but I think they only want to pay attention to what's important to them. And I think the jury, having been instructed that you can't consider this, the financial crimes, as propensity, they're kind of like, all right, well, we already know he's a bad guy. And so now they're moving on and not really paying attention to that. However, in closing, I believe the prosecution is going to lay out an absolute timeline of every single witness, the time, the date of each of these actual data points or facts that you can lay out that are not able to be misconstrued, such as phones, such as the car. That's going to be laid out, and they're going to assist the jury in hopefully making a decision in that.
I was talking to someone earlier today, and they were like, they asked me a question like, why can't the state call Murdaugh on the stand? I mean, the defense would be the one to put Murdaugh on the stand. And explain to our viewers why the state, just on their case, could not put the defendant on the stand.
Well, we have the right against self-incrimination in this country. It means that you do not have to testify. You do not have to present any evidence. It is the government's burden of proof. And that's why I do what I do. It's because we need to hold the government accountable to prove what they say and not make us disprove what they say. It's kind of why we came over to this country from England, to be honest. It's the right against self-incrimination.
Speaking of the defendant in this case, there is some anticipation that he may testify. He may not. That's his right if he wants to do so or not. If he takes the stand, is that going to open the door for the prosecution to ask all kind of questions about these alleged financial crimes, not only the double murder?
Oh, absolutely. However, they're already getting into it. Mm-hmm. There hadn't been much questioning by defense lawyers of whether or not these financial crimes actually occurred or didn't occur.
Right.
They've accepted them kind of at face value. The only real questions of these witnesses have kind of been by the defense about his character as a father, whether he cared for his family, whether he cared for his friends. They've not really been about, did these financial crimes occur or not occur? That's not really contested. So that's why I kind of think it's a setup that he may get up there and say, yeah, I did that, but I didn't do this, being the murder.
And that was also a topic of conversation by some today, that maybe he gets on the stand, maybe the defense says, look, he's got issues, he's got problems. You've heard some of his friends testify. He's got some issues when it comes to opioids. He's got some problems here, but that's not connected to what happened. Although the circumstantial evidence that they presented, he's confronted about one thing the morning of the murders, and then the murders happened just a few hours later.
I agree with that. That's what they're trying to show, that this was the day of, he was about to get caught, and he went out and committed these murders to kind of deflect the conversation of everybody. You know, I've always said I'm not 100% buying that motive, just the criminal defense side of me. However, I've also said that I think he was irrational, and irrational people do irrational things.
Reports that the defense has a focus group, so to say, listening to the testimony, and that the focus group not buying the state's motive that he killed his wife and his son as a distraction to the financial crimes. Is it common to have focus groups in high-profile cases like this for the defense?
I think in big cases you will have focus groups. In smaller cases, your focus group might not necessarily be folks outside of your circle. You may go as a lawyer and talk to other lawyers and say, what do you think about this? So we always have focus groups. Many of us are members of organizations, and we talk. We don't say names or anything about our cases, but we talk about our cases and kind of bounce ideas off of each other. So all cases have focus groups. Is whether or not it's high profile enough to put the resources into an actual focus group itself.
All right, well, it sounds like we have at least 2 weeks or more left of this very high-profile case that has riveted the nation's attention. Taylor Bell, thank you for your expertise tonight. We appreciate it so much.
Thank you for having me.
Testimony is going to resume tomorrow morning at 9:30. We will be there. You can watch it right here on our YouTube channel. You can watch it on WLTX Plus. You can watch it on our website, WLTX.com as well. Again, we'll have live team coverage tomorrow from Walterboro.